Alright everyone, we start off today talking about warmongering and Ukraine. It's still going on. I did make a video like this a couple of days ago. Well, more than a couple, I think like 3 or 4, of course. But then I got a strike, and YouTube, despite, restoring my account functionality, the appeal worked. The problem is that I had a video over 15 minutes on this topic as of that day, and even though 20,000+ people had already watched it, YouTube still abandoned processing the video, so it wasn't watchable, so I had to delete it because it didn't go back to being available after the strike was restored. So this is on the use of the term Coalition of the Willing, which any millennial, probably it harkens back to the invasion of Iraq. When this sort of terminology, it's chosen for a reason, is used by the U.S. government, it shows that the conflict that they have in mind, which right now is ostensibly over Ukraine, it's really a money-making endeavor. It's not about saving lives. It's not about preserving the sovereignty of the Ukrainian people or anything like that. It's really it's a naked power grab. The government wants to distract from many problems that are happening domestically with the economy, other diplomatic issues, because Biden, of course, is doing a poor job, even more poor than expected, including by people like myself that were already pessimistically appraising the possibilities of his asterisk administration, and it's a disgrace. It's basically layer upon layer of propaganda. It's like a propaganda lasagna. That's basically what you could call U.S. foreign policy under Joe Biden thus far. Keep in mind, I will make 3 exclusive videos today and all days except for the 2nd of February. There's a big announcement for that day. For another 4 days because of YouTube's algorithms. And I'm thinking about dropping down to just making 1 YouTube video each day, because clearly they don't favor workhorse creators anymore. They favor people that make heavily edited longer form content, or they make the occasional short, which doesn't make a lot of sense. They used to reward you if you worked hard and you were making quality content each day. They no longer do. So links down below if you're watching on YouTube, in a pinned comment, also in description cross-platform. Keep in mind, things are growing rapidly on Rumble, on BitChute, and on Odyssey, as well as on Minds, actually, where I upload videos. Not so much Daily Motion, but it is a stable site, so I just throw it in there and I put my videos on there, and they have less censorship than YouTube, which is fairly sad because it's a French company. Anyway, we'll get into this. Here's the thing. When I saw several sources reporting on the White House using this particular term, Coalition of the Willing, it was basically like having a flashback to 2003 or thereabouts, and W was president. This makes sense. Of course, W was fake incoherency, Biden's real incoherency, but the level of incoherence is similar. I'd say Biden is more far gone than Bush, because Bush was a method actor, of course. He would play dumb on TV and let Cheney be the bad guy. He's like the Emperor Palpatine figure, and Bush was just a screwball. He's just the slightly befuddled but harmless man. He played that role on TV essentially for the war generation. It was never real, and now you have a situation where both Kamala and Biden are unliked desperately. Kamala somehow even more. I guess she's the Palpatine of the administration now. But the terminology is the same as in the lead up to invading Iraq. When we invaded Iraq, the goal was not to really nation build, other than getting lucrative contracts. Saddam was a problem for U.S. foreign policy because he had gone rogue. They did the same thing to Gaddafi, by the way. But one of the big reasons why the invasion took place, despite the same figures in the admin, including Rumsfeld and others, and I think Cheney as well prior in the 90s, they had warned against invading Iraq. Then they realized, hey, we've got a whole new generation of military toys we want to test. Let's test them there. Well, now some time has passed. We've exited mostly Iraq. We're not really involved there on a major basis. We've left Afghanistan high and dry after siphoning all the blood that we could out of that theater. Well, now we need a new conflict. Now we can't go to war with Russia, and anyone that thinks this is about Ukrainian sovereignty doesn't understand. Neither NATO nor the U.S. and its allies at large can have a direct confrontation with Russia. So what are we doing? We're unloading toys into the region. We're giving Ukraine all sorts of lethal aid right now because we want to see it tested in a live combat scenario. We can't do it ourselves, but we can let the Ukrainians test it, and then we can derive statistics and so forth from that while making life more difficult for the Russians. Now, I'm not a Russophile. I'm not like Caleb Maupin, who thinks that imperialism and invading people is great as long as it's not Uncle Sam doing it. It's really the same thing. Russia is acting similarly to how the United States often acts towards foreign theaters. That being said, there is no countermeasure for it. When you hear the drums of war beating and people saying, well, if you don't get in line, it's more proof that the Russians have co-opted elements of the U.S. government because there are people that don't want to get directly involved in Ukraine. What I think we should do first, we should draft all the warmongers. Anyone that's publicly proclaiming, hey, fuck Russia, haha, let's have World War III, draft them. Put them in the front lines. Let them go there. Give them the weapons and everything. Let them go be partisans if you're so brave. If you really don't want to crap your pants in a trench or something and you think that you're going to be Rambo, why don't you go over and prove it? Why don't we take all the kids of politicians that are warmongering as well and put them over there? Hunter Biden should be over there right now. He can sell crack to the Ukrainians. He's already gotten a bunch of money from them. Now it's time to pay the piper. Now you have to smoke the pipe. But the specific term should rub everyone in this generation the wrong way. Are we going to be sold another pig in the poke style of conflict that we know has no, I mean, it's completely open-ended. Russia, if it chooses to, will invade eastern Ukraine. They've already been crying for Donbass, etc. for years now in the wake of Crimea's fall. They know they can do it. They know NATO can't stop them. In the meantime, I don't even know what Putin's waiting for. We're just giving more and more lethal aid to the Ukrainian forces that are badly outnumbered, would be fighting, though, on their own home turf with a huge number of partisans there that have sworn that they'll fight too. It would be bloody for Russia, which shows me Russia probably has an ulterior motive too. They may be drawing up forces in order to force NATO to look weak when they don't invade. That's the possibility. Then you have the other problem, and this is a big one. You have the problem where the messaging that you have from Ukraine and the messaging that you have from the Biden camp are basically polar opposites right now. Joe Biden says, well, it's basically inevitable that the Russians will invade. The Ukrainian government the next day counters that and says, well, no, I mean, there aren't enough troops there probably to stage a large-scale invasion yet anyway. And we're the ones that live here. You know, I actually live here, says their leader, their president or prime minister or whatever it is. I think I know better than Biden. We appreciate the fact that you like our sovereignty. We appreciate the help and the aid and all these things. But we know what's actually going on, and we're still holding negotiations. Putin is effectively ignoring Biden because Biden's a steward anyway. I would ignore him too, and so should everyone else. But he's still parlaying with the Ukrainians. So we've got a messaging problem. We also had a problem, of course, at his prior speech, his 9th major address that he gave like a week ago, in which he said in no uncertain terms that if the Russians do stage an invasion, but it's limited, so basically they just pour into a couple of border provinces, that there wouldn't be any major repercussions. This is exactly the opposite of what you want to do when you're negotiating with a potential hostile force. You want the ambiguity. But this shouldn't surprise us either, because Biden abandoned strategic ambiguity as well on Taiwan. I support maintaining Taiwanese sovereignty. Of course, the government of Taiwan is the only legitimate government of all of China. There is no China. It's West Taiwan, effectively. That is, by the way, what the U.S. recognized up until the mid-1970s. We never should have abandoned that concept. But that being said, would I trust Joe Biden to mount a response if Taiwan were attacked? Do I expect him to do great diplomatic things and stave off attacks in Ukraine? I don't think that he wants to. I think they're hoping the Russians invade so that all those toys can be tested. And U.S. military contractors and glowing ones from the CIA and other groups helping to train and fund and equip Ukrainian partisans in areas that Russia overruns, they'll have a field day. And billions of dollars will be made, and it'll probably involve the drug trade, because anytime the glowing ones get involved, they need their coke, they need their heroin. And that's what it's about. It's despicable. We're still somehow, than what the Biden administration's confused foreign policy is in this particular scenario, is the legacy media. Where is the legacy media to say, hey, people are tired of war, maybe we can calm it down a little bit? CNN isn't reporting that. MSNBC's not saying it. We've got a weird juxtaposition where millennials, we're perpetually confused, because now you have like Fox saying, hey, this is probably a bad idea, and we have so-called liberal enlightened individuals saying, no, that's unpatriotic. You just don't like Biden. You're pro-Russia. You love Putin. You love human rights abuses. When is it in the last half century, with a very small number of exceptions, where is it that U.S. policy in regards to fighting for a cause, for a nation, for a people or something, where has it succeeded? And why should I believe that Biden and his even more inept administration can't pull off what the other administrations didn't manage to pull off? Trump was the only recent president not to start a new war. That was appreciated, and somehow he was going to start World War III, according to Krugman and CNN and all these others. Biden is actually beating the drums of war, and I hear very, very little from the legacy media other than to say that people are Russian shills if they oppose the concept of NATO going in. We've got more and more NATO forces and coalition forces, again, that term should scare you, massing in Eastern Europe. Russia's not going to attack Poland or the Baltic states. They're already in NATO. It would be suicidal, and it probably would lead to World War III. At the very least, it would lead to a tit-for-tat that Russia couldn't win. They have a pretty good military. They're capable of steamrolling the Ukrainians. They're not capable of attacking the Polish and the Baltics at the same time. They'd lose. Finland, not in NATO. They'd probably get involved. They'd say, hey, remember the Winter War? We can have this again. Russia is not a good actor in the world. Again, I'm not a Sinophile or a Russophile like some people. They look at U.S. foreign policy, say it's bad, and so they say Russia good. I'm not taken in by that football team bullshit mentality. But they're not an insane actor. Neither is China. Russia's not going to attack NATO. NATO, likewise, is, again, not a great actor in many cases, let's be honest, but it's not an insane actor. This is for money. The despicable part is that we have nobody questioning the actual modus behind why this is happening. Russia can warmonger and imperialize and do all of these other things. What exactly are the NATO forces going to do? They're not going to open fire on Russian tanks or Russian trucks or bomb a military base, because that would lead to potentially a nuclear war. So why are they there? Why are we spending all of the money running sorties near the border? To give intel to people that clearly don't need the intel and have a totally topsy-turvy appraisal of the situation from what the Biden administration has? And then when we see these linguistic psyops, when we see the specter of patriotism rear its head, when we have terms like coalition of the willing, it's exactly like the early 2000s and how Saddam was spoken of. It's exactly how Gaddafi was spoken of, and time again, when these struggles happen, the area gets wrecked, it destabilizes, you end up with human trafficking and drugs and things like that, and then eventually, when the US and NATO withdraw or lessen their involvement, you get groups like the Taliban grabbing up a bunch of US goods as well, because Biden never thought to scuttle the tank, so to speak, and then you rinse and repeat. You go on to the next engagement. It's perpetual. It's a money-making endeavor. The fact that we don't see more people that are supposedly intelligent questioning the motives behind this, not seeing the connection even linguistically that's as plain as day to someone like myself, the fact that they're not talking about it is the most despicable at all. So while I'm not a Putin fan, and no, I wouldn't be happy if Russia decides to kill a bunch of Ukrainians, we've dropped the ball. We never admitted them to NATO. We never did anything to prevent this from happening, and people are all flabbergasted and surprised now, and so all they can say is, well, Russia bad, ergo Biden good, and if NATO forces go in, hey, that's great, let's have a war. Yeah, nobody will survive it. I don't want to sign up to go and shoot Russians, but other people's kids should have to do that. Yeah, wonderful. Star-Spangled Banner and the stripes and stars and fireworks and stuff. Grandma and apple pie. How patriotic. Let's waste more money, time, and blood on absolutely nothing. That's about all. Peace out.